Good morning and welcome to CosmoQuest Community Coffee. It is Monday, which means that I am here. I am your host, Gillian Rhodes, and it is Monday, which means we are talking about the intersection of astronomy and art and all of the wonderful ways that they fuse and fission together. I am not going to spend a lot of time talking this morning because I want to get started on today's session as soon as possible because I have the most amazing guest today. I am joined from Carolina by Adam. How do I say your last name? Adam, I'll say it thus. And you can tell me after the introduction. He is a circus artist, a scientist, a physicist, and has been doing some incredible work on weightlessness and movement in ZeroG. Thank you for being here, Adam.
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, my last name is Dipert.
Dipert. Okay.
Yes.
I was going to go for the French version, and then I was like, I'm not sure if that's the right way to go.
Yeah, it's German, but it's kind of old and distorted. And so, but we all appreciate the French around here. So thank you for bringing them up.
Awesome. Well, so before we just kind of jump into your work, if you want to just give a quick introduction onto you and your work.
Yeah, so I have been a circus performer since 2002, and I just completed my PhD in physics last year. And in my life, these things are very much a single unit, and they are expressions of the same thing. And in the last 7 years, I have taken a deep interest in movement and weightlessness. And I've been on 3 parabolic flights and have written computer programs to understand the human body and weightlessness, and just find this field to be deep and unexplored and unintuitive. And so I am really excited to have the opportunity to share some of what I've been finding with you. So thank you for having me.
You're absolutely welcome. So yes, the weightlessness is the topic of the day, and the movement that you've been doing. I've seen some of the videos and they're incredible. We will have them coming up in a bit. But just kind of as a way to introduce this topic, how did you get into doing weightlessness in the first place? How did that come about?
Yeah, so I had a friend who we bought her a parabolic flight for her 40th birthday, and a bunch of us pitched in. And then I took her to it, and I got to see just what the situation was and got to see the airplane and see the crew. And I said, you know what? There it is. This is right here. It's possible. And I find a lot of people who think about art in space or dance in space or entertainment in space as if it's this thing that's going to happen someday. You know, one day that's going to be really cool when we have whatever. And I just kind of had this experience that, you know, what are we waiting for? Nothing. We have the technology. This is possible. There's right. The only thing we're waiting for is for us to say yes. And the situation is not perfect. You know, it's an airplane. It's kind of, they're not gorgeous, but there are so many steps that any step is a step toward the goal, which is understanding how this can happen. And so, yeah, after I saw that on her first flight, which was, October 2015, then I immediately started saving my money. I said, I'm gonna make this happen. And I went on my first flight in 2016.
Right. And I mean, there's a lot to talk about and kind of break down. But I think you want to, would you like to show us the little teaser of?
Yeah, do you want to roll that first ZeroG clip?
And you can talk about it as well as we go. But the first time I saw this, you know, it's just like chaos. Quite frankly, it just looks like chaos. I mean, in the moment, like, is it as utterly chaotic as it seems in the video?
It is much more chaotic than it seems in the video. You know, our entire, like, the process by which we take sensory input and we turn it into how we imagine the world is around us. That's called proprioception. And that's related to touching things and feeling things and, feeling gravity pulling on our vestibular system and all of this kind of stuff. And so when you're in weightlessness, this really powerful force that you're feeling all the time, which is gravity, is suddenly not there to support you any longer. And you have to, you aren't even seeing through the same eyes. One of my mentors who I really look up to, her name is Kitsu, and she has been studying ZeroG movement since 1990, and she's a dancer in Paris. She says that the first thing that happens is you actually lose your entire body because you no longer are aware of how to sense it. Like you haven't had the experience of sensing it in this format. And so you become all eyes. And then the trick is to come back into your body. And so when you're first having your experience and it's really overwhelming, you not only become just eyes, you get tunnel vision and you can't even see, the periphery. And so you kind of like expand the eyes out and then expand awareness out into your body. And then that's when you can start engaging really in the space and understanding where's the ceiling and where's the floor. And do you even need terms like ceiling and the floor, or are those just surfaces? And then if you think about when you're on a dance floor or something, or you're at a bar, or, you're just in a situation where you're around a lot of people, then for me, my tracking is like on the floor, that I'm kind of measuring where the other people are on the floor. So I'm kind of seeing like a two-dimensional layout of the people around me. And then that's how I navigate the space so that I can move efficiently. But in this case, anybody could be in any direction on any side of you. And you can't do anything about that other than respond to it. So, yeah, it requires a lot of tuning into something that we haven't tuned into before.
That's super cool. And I do want to talk more about the experience of it in a bit, but just because as you're saying, like your entire experience of yourself and your body is completely different. So how do you train for it? How do you prepare for these flights? Because I have the spoilers. I know that you were really approaching this from a very physical perspective and like very technical and how you were going to approach it. So tell us a little bit about that.
The process of figuring out how to identify the pieces of this experience has taken a lot of steps and taken a lot of talking to people. And so one of the primary ways that I think is the most related to weightlessness in its entire construction is just being in a pool and being underwater in the pool. But then I use a number of other techniques, and I have had the opportunity to try things like indoor skydiving and sensory deprivation chambers. So yeah, so here's actually some video of that. So this is us moving in the pool here. This is a sensory deprivation chamber. These are aerial harnesses where we can spin freely. This is a rotating room. And so I use all of these to prepare myself. And every one of them, teaches you a different aspect. Like the rotating room really messes up your vestibular system. So you have to figure out how is it that you remain cognitive and aware when things are a little distorted. When you're in the pool, you can move in every direction very easily, other than the fact that, of course, you can't be breathing. When you're in the wind tunnel, you can practice being in weird positions and like moving super quickly from one side to the other. But really, so in this video that you're seeing right here, this is Tony, Craig, and I. And I feel like one of the things that the pool facilitates a deeper understanding of, that we imagine it in dance, in the sense that like we can kind of feel the push and pull that you experience with another person when you're doing some type of partner dance. But when you're in weightlessness or in the pool, when you are pushing or pulling on another person, that energy isn't absorbed in your feet or in your legs if you're laying down or something. You're really pulled toward or pushed away from the other person. And so that relationship between exerting force and having your entire body change positions is fundamental to how we expect our movement to happen. And so yeah, I feel like this specific style of movement in the pool, where we have a short pool, Kitsu had shown us this technique. So it's like a 4-foot tall pool, 90-degree water, no wetsuits or anything that'll make you float, nose plugs, goggles, and then just be under as long as you can and just kind of tune into the experience of pushing and pulling on the other person.
That's really cool. And so as you were kind of preparing for this flight, did you have, I think you've been on a couple, did you have like specific goals in mind that you wanted to accomplish in being on the flight? Or kind of when you were going into it, what did you want to do with that time? Because technically, I mean, the parabolic flights, I think you told me, you just get like max 20-30 seconds of weightlessness per parabola.
Yeah, so that's it. You get 20 to 30 seconds per parabola, and on each flight you get about 15 parabolas. So
not very much time at all, like to do anything.
Right. Yeah. And the first parabola will be Mars gravity, which is 1/3 of the Earth's. The next two will be Moon gravity, which is 1/6 of the Earth's gravity. And then you usually get 12 zero gravity. And I did have an opportunity to prepare or to be on a research flight where we got 28 parabolas. So that was really nice to have that opportunity. But yeah, I mean, you're talking about 6 minutes of weightlessness total. And so I go in with a list, I write it all down and I make my plan ahead of time. And so once I have some concept about what I could do, then you have to kind of be respectful of yourself and your ability and the newness of this, and that you may or may not accomplish exactly what you're thinking about. There's kind of a mix of choreographic ability as well as like improvise and just make it work if it can work. And so this next video that I wanted to share is a sequence that I had come up with. So I found this in some literature from the 1960s, where you can get yourself to rotate around kind of your spinal axis. And one of the ways is to put your hands above your head and kind of like wiggle them around in a circle. But then you can do that with your entire torso, and you can do it with your legs at the same time. And so if you want to go ahead and roll that clip, then so let's see. Yeah, line 21. Hang on, sorry, we're having a mild technical difficulty. That was not exactly what I was aiming for. You got to see a little more ZeroG movement there, though. Yeah, so there's this move, and they refer to it as, we refer to it as a crescent. And so you can see how when I'm not touching anything, I put my hands up and my legs over, and then I try to like rotate them both in the same direction around my body's central axis. And that changes what direction I'm facing, right? Which is really just a simple thing, how do you turn your direction? But that's really complicated when you're not touching anything. So I did it on my first flight, and then it was really confusing. So I came back and said, okay, I need to practice this. And so I started practicing it in the pool. And so this is me doing it in the pool. And you can see that it can be done continuously, right? We're not, and this is Tony again, we're not touching anything. And you can even stop going in one direction and then change back and start going in the other direction. So we started doing that. Then I said, okay, well, actually in the flight, it's kind of hard if you're not like highly directional. Like if you don't push off of something, then you can just be floating anyway. So we started practicing pushing off of the wall of the pool. So then we could have intentional direction, then do the turn and try to, do it before we reach the opposite wall. So that's what we were practicing there. And then this is the video of me doing it on my last flight in November. And so you can see that I push off the wall, I rotate to my right and then stop and then rotate to the left a little bit. It wasn't crazy successful, but it's getting there, right? And that's kind of the stepping stones, is to come up with an idea and figure out how you can implement it. And one of the things that's so weird about it is that when we do an action on Earth, we do it so many times that it's easy for you to believe that when you push your foot backward, you're going to go forward. Or if you push your foot forward, you're going to move backward. Or if you're, learning any skill, you learn how to throw a ball. If you practice throwing the ball, you do it like 500 times at least to get good for, if you're doing basketball or something, right? Or in the case of juggling, we literally throw balls millions of times to get good at juggling. And in the context that I'm in, I don't have the opportunity to do this millions of times. If I could be in space for 3 days, I could do something continuously for 3 days, but that hasn't been the situation yet. Yeah. So it's about taking as much time, make as much on the expensive part as you can by doing as much work ahead of time as possible, and realize you're still actually not going to be totally prepared.
Right. So let's just walk us through briefly just that experience, like the first few moments of weightlessness, like what it feels like, what it's, how you told me when we spoke before some interesting stories about how people kind of react when, weightlessness starts. So just kind of walk us through that feeling of like the first moments of weightlessness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's see. Okay. So if you close your eyes and imagine, just kind of like what you're feeling, and you're feeling something pushing on you, right? Probably your chair or the ground. You might feel your back leaning against something if you're laying down. There's all these extra forces going on that help you to orient. And when you first go into weightlessness, it's not just all of those external forces start to turn off, right? But then also all of your internal awareness of your directionality starts to turn off. And as soon as you are weightless, you're now completely moving around your center of mass, which is somewhere between the bottom of your butt and your belly button, okay? So that anytime you move, it actually is always in relationship to that center of mass point. So what I found is that a lot of people, when they're laying down, the weightlessness starts, and then they say, oh yeah, the weightlessness is starting, and they lean forward, right? And so their legs actually, their legs come up and their head comes up, and so their butt goes down, right? Because like they kind of fold up, and then their butt hits the floor, and then they bounce up to the top. And so if we roll this next video, then you can see, so this was kind of my third parabola or something, and you can kind of see me experimenting with moving around the space, but you can just see kind of the other, folks on their first experience, or, on their first couple of flights, and just like the challenge of figuring out how to orient yourself, right? Or where up and down are. In the case of what I was doing here, I was saying, I want to be able to control where my body is in space. To do that, kind of like soccer playing or maybe basketball playing, I need to get to open space, right? So I need to figure out where the other people are, and then I need to get away from them so that I can actually control what I'm doing. And you can probably roll that one more time if you want. So, that's about pushing hard enough with your hands that your entire body is going to move. Yeah. And pushing easy enough with your feet that your head isn't just going to smash into the ceiling really quickly. right?
Right.
Yeah, and so I'm kind of the, super active guy on the right who's bald as I am right now. And so you can just see, like, here's the feet, right? And figuring out how to do that gently. And so, yeah, that's those are the types of questions that you have to ask, is just, how can I do something that used to be really simple?
Right. And there was just a question in the chat, so I wanted to ask this. A lot of people experience, especially on these parabolic flights, dizziness, nausea, and all that. Did you have that experience as well, or were you able to kind of, your training as an artist, a circus artist, and all that, did that help you kind of deal with the disorientation?
Yes, my training definitely helps. I also grew up in Florida, and so I spent a lot of time on boats when I was a kid. And I think when I've talked to people who are vestibular experts, they say that people who have spent a lot of time on boats have a better ability to have vestibular robustness, I think was what they would say. But so Kitsu has worked with a lot of dancers, and she says that the dancer's body and the dancer's mind does adapt more easily to this environment, and that's been my experience. Yeah. And Tony also, we had trained her for about a year before we went on the flight together, and she stayed with it pretty well, and so that felt like a really good data point that this training does work.
Okay. And well, speaking of Tony, I definitely want to take some time to talk about that. So basically, you have a lot of training in contact improvisation, and one of the things that you said you were really happy about was some of the flights that you were able to do, kind of translating a little bit of this dance partner experience with Tony. So we saw her in the pool with you. So tell us a little bit about the flights that you did, what you were aiming for, and kind of how did that all worked out?
Yeah, so in 2019, we did quite a bit of training. We flew Kitsu over to the United States for her to do some training with us at Smith College. That was her first training for dancers in the States, so I felt really proud to have facilitated that. Right. And then we did 3 weeks of training in Seattle, and then a week in North Carolina, which these were highly focused periods where we were doing 2 to 3 studio practices a day, studio being indoor skydiving or float tanks or, like whatever it is, and then spending the extra time reviewing the videos, going over it, taking notes, really doing the process that you have to do in order to fully engage with something. And then we did 1 more week of training in Massachusetts prior to going on the flight. And so with her, so she is a MFA graduate at Smith College. She just graduated in May, and she was in the middle of her program during this time. And so she was able to practice it in the studio and think about it as she was doing her own choreographic development processes and things. And so, for me to say, oh, I trained her, that's not completely an accurate statement, because she's a very motivated person who was spending a lot of time thinking about it and articulating it herself. In prep prior to this, also after our training with Kitsu, we had written an article for Contact Quarterly. And so that gave us even more depth. And the reason I'm saying all of these things kind of building up to it is that you can think about it as a physical practice. You can think about it as kind of an emotional release practice or something, because we all need relief from our pressures, and gravity is one of those things. And you can think about it as cognitive practice or whatever. And I just wanted to say, we really went through all of those steps. We did as many of the things as we possibly could do, rather than just kind of winging it. And so when we actually went on the flight, and if you want to go ahead and roll the video, that would be great. We had already really thought about what we were wanting to do and the style of doing it. And we had lists for, each parabola and what we were going to be trying during it. And I would say about 80% of our plans worked out, which I feel is a really high success rate. And it was unbelievable to really feel. So here you can really see us pushing and pulling on each other. We're kind of doing like a steering wheel kind of move. We just wanted to see, you know, how much can you get the other person to rotate, or, you know, it plays back on yourself. How much do you rotate when this happens? And we ended up with some really beautiful moments like this, right? Where just a couple of times we were able to deviate from our plan and fall into the connection that we have as dancers. And although contact improvisation, which you mentioned in the development of this question, is a form that is related to falling, and it's a form that's related to different head orientations and being able to track the environment while you're upside down or something. It actually is funny, because when you're in weightlessness, you're not falling. You know, so it's like, it's a totally different thing. And there's really this one contact improvisation practice that I found useful called push, reach, pull, which is, you know, just do those things in sequence. You push and then you reach and then you pull, and it kind of has intention with the reaching section, right? It has kind of the extension and contraction experiences with the pushing and pulling sections. And so that was really inspiring. And then also the crescent, which is, related to that maneuver that I kind of showed you, the ZeroG video, and then the pull video, and then the ZeroG video. So it's such a funny thing, because it seems like it would be related so strongly. And I love contact improvisation, and I want it to be related. But then as I really question myself, I'm like, well, how much is it actually related? And, so it's kind of like they're near each other, and there's crossover, and there's useful stuff. And, but yeah, I would not go so far as to just say, if you're a contact improvisation dancer, then you'll definitely be good at ZeroG movement or something, Right. Yeah. And I guess that's one thing, is that when you're moving your head in the gravitational field and you can feel changes in your vestibular response to the environment, that's an important aspect of your experience, in the sense that when you're doing a cartwheel, being upside down is part of it, right? But when you're in weightlessness, you don't feel that upside down part. So it's not a part of it. So it changes the experience pretty reasonably. Yeah.
Yeah. We could honestly just keep talking about this for hours and hours, but I want to take a little bit of a different track and get serious for a moment, because I know you're really passionate about this work, and it's not just because people will make art in space eventually, but you have the implications of this work in weightlessness. I think you see it as having implications not just for people as they go to space, but also for people as they're here on the planet. So can you talk a little bit about some of those ideas that you have, and the gravitational biasing and the embodiment of, how we think of embodiment, and what, implications your work has on that?
Yeah, so I think one of the first things that I have wondered, so I've gone into this space where I've been saying, I want to understand weightlessness, and I want to develop the rule set, like an understanding of the rule set that is there, and then be fully embodied in it. And fully embodied means like bringing all of me and saying yes to that, and not trying to take my cultural programming from Earth with me to go there. But of course we do, and that's part of it. And so as I look back, from the position of weightlessness, and say, well, it's interesting, what does this teach me about my life, not in weightlessness? And what it's led me to see is that there's gravity. Did you guys notice that? The stuff is everywhere. It's crazy. And it has a big influence on us. And if we think about the branch of cognitive science called embodied cognition, which has been developed over the last 50 years or so, the logic is that there's a strong relationship between the specific type of physical form you have and the specific types of sensing that you do and the type of thinking that comes out of that, right? Because you grow up and you taste things and you smell things and you see things happening, and then you make relationships between things in the environment. And those relationships from things in the environment influence the types of metaphors that we develop, right? Because we can say things are on top of other things, or things are higher than other things, right? For example, numbers can be high, right? Like the stock market is up today. There is nothing fundamental about numbers that makes them higher or lower, right? This in the branch of cognitive or embodied cognition, what they would say is that what we have is a relationship between more and up, in the sense that if you're filling up a glass, more in the glass means the water level is higher, right? So we relate more and upness. And then that just steamrolls into so many other branches of our life. And so I've been thinking about this as gravitational biasing, that we are unaware of the ways in which gravity is influencing the style of metaphor development that we're doing. So that's one thing that I really want to share with you. The other one that kind of came up as we were preparing for this, and as I'm thinking about our situation in the United States, that just like with the incredible awareness about the experience of darker skinned people in our communities, and how intense it has been for so long, for so many of them, and kind of just like I kind of wanted to say something about the importance of that and how it relates to this work that I'm doing, in the sense that I described that I'm trying to wipe my slate clean and go into weightlessness to learn from weightlessness, right? And to ask, what can I learn from this environment, and what is it that it can teach me? And that these are different questions, right? What can I learn and what can it teach? Those are two different things. And it's often happening that we are associating whiteness with neutrality in some situations. And with me being a white man in the United States, coming from the position that I am, I think it's really important for me to recognize that I'm not actually coming at it totally neutrally, and that I do have cultural biasing inside of my expectations. I'm highly trained in the sciences, which have, in Western culture been very dominated by white men. And I just really, I think I would encourage other people in similar positions to myself to recognize the lack of neutrality that we come to these situations with, and to remain open to, what things are we going to learn when more people with other body styles and other body identities are able to express their findings in these environments. And I just can't wait. That's what I have to say. I cannot wait to see who else comes at these questions and what types of answers they find in their particular embodied being.
That's awesome. Listen, before we wrap this up, there are some questions from the chat that I have to ask you.
Great.
Adam Altogether is asking if there was music on the flights.
No, there is no music. In Europe, there has been a company who has done 2 raves on a flight, and they brought some DJs and stuff. And in the United States, there was one guy who did a kind of rave type of thing, so they had like drum and bass kind of music and lights and all of that kind of stuff. So that seems like that would be pretty fun, go and listen to music while you're doing it. But it's pretty rugged. Yep, it's like a gymnasium that's only 7 feet tall.
Right, I
Yep.
see.
Yeah.
And mostly we have not talked at all about your academic work, but just briefly, what's your area of physics that you did your PhD?
Yeah, so I do experimental nuclear physics, and by that I mean I study things about the nucleus of atoms, and in particular I study the nucleus of the helium-3 atom, and we do this at cryogenic temperatures. So I have cooled something down to 0.07 Kelvin, and just to give you a scale of that, Earth temperature, like just normal surface temperature, is about 300 Kelvin for a comfortable environment. Space is 2.7 Kelvin, and we went down to 0.07 Kelvin. And so yeah, I do really cold things, and I specialize in magnetic fields of those. Yeah.
Cool. And so there's one more question, and it's could your work with ZeroG art help design work skills for future maintenance people on stations that astronauts may not have need or thought of?
I think so. I have had the opportunity to talk to a number of astronauts, and a lot of them, they're pushed so hard to do their job, which is super important, obviously, right? They need to be able to do their jobs and to work with the scientists to accomplish their tasks, but they don't spend a lot of time focusing on their physical experience and understanding what it's going to be like, and they end up spending 3 to 4 days very disoriented after they get up there. And if we want to put it in a term that every buddy can understand why that's important, that costs millions of dollars, right? I know, take for example, when you're kind of tired, right? Are you more likely to kind of bump your elbow against something or like scratch your hand or something? I am. And if astronauts are doing that, that's a big problem. And so yeah, I'm really hope that I have the opportunity to work with preparing people for their weightless experiences, and I do plan to move into ZeroG coaching if as we get out of our current world state.
Awesome. Cool. And so, if people are interested in learning more about your work or following you, where can they go to find your work? Where can they follow you on social media?
Yeah, so if you go to my website, just adamdipert.com, then that has links to all of my social media things. I can't say I'm in super active on social media, but I do my best to respond to things. It's not like I push it away. And I have Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and stuff. But if you go onto my website, I have a contact form. And if you just want to hear about what's going on, as I said, I am going to be moving into helping other people understand their movement possibilities as we get out of COVID. And so if you want to be informed about what's going on as that happens, then you are invited to fill out my little notification form, and I'll let you know as things are happening in the future.
Awesome. Well, Adam, it's just been a delight to talk to you. I think it's been, we've gone through all kinds of stuff, and we've seen some wonderful, playful ZeroG. And yes, thank you for being here. It's really fun.
Thank you so much for having me, Gillian. This has been a real honor, and I hope that it's slightly inspiring, and I hope that whatever future of movement exploration the people in this room are looking at, I hope that you're able to look at them with open eyes and find some inspiration from space.
Awesome. Well, that's all, folks. This has been Community Coffee. We will be back streaming at 1 hour and 45 minutes from now with the Daily Space. Dr. Pamela will be bringing you all of the science news of the day. And make sure to follow us. And as basically, CosmoQuest is brought to you by you. So check the links in the chat about how you can get involved and donate. And have a wonderful Monday. Bye-bye.